Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Aaron Blake believed that love was a construct made of small daily sacrifices, and for 5 years he dedicated himself to building alone the pillars of a future he imagined sharing with Lauren. While she was studying law at a respected university, he worked non-stop, piling up exhausting shifts to cover tuition, books, transportation, and everything else she needed. His days started before most people woke up and ended long after the city had gone to sleep. Late-night deliveries, heavy loads during the day, and between one job and another, Aaron held on to the hope that it would all be worth it when he saw Lauren graduate, fulfilled, wearing a gown and holding her diploma, calling him to share in the dream they'd built together. The diploma arrived. Graduation came with photos, flowers, and emotional speeches. Lauren wore the robe like someone stepping into a new identity, and Aaron watched it all with eyes shining with pride, as if every sleepless night and every backache had been rewarded in that moment. He applauded standing, unaware that for her, that diploma was also a ticket out of the life they'd shared until then. After graduation, Aaron began to notice something had changed. Lauren not only seemed distant but also acted as if every moment they spent together was too heavy a burden to carry. One ordinary afternoon, during a rare moment when Lauren was home, Aaron had the idea to help her set up her laptop for an interview at a big law firm. A simple gesture, carrying all his desire to still be useful, to show he was there to support her. When he turned on the computer and was updating programs, a notification blinked in the corner of the screen. Aaron wasn't one to invade anyone's privacy, but the short phrase, visible without needing to open any app, froze him where he stood. Now that he's paid for your degree, you can divorce him, and we can be together. The world around him seemed to lose sound, ground, air. It was as if he'd been dealt a blow that pierced him from the inside. For a moment, his mind tried to find some explanation, some misunderstanding that would make those words less brutal. But there was a cruel clarity in the message that left no room for interpretation. Aaron closed the laptop with trembling hands and walked into the living room, where Lauren was distractedly flipping through channels. He stared at her, unable to hide the shock written across his face. Lauren, noticing his expression and the closed laptop in his arms, seemed to immediately understand what had happened. Without surprise, without rushing to explain herself, without even changing her tone of voice, she got up, grabbed a blue folder, and handed it to him as if delivering an ordinary envelope. Inside were the divorce papers, already fully filled out, division of assets, separation clauses, deadlines. Everything planned in advance, as if Aaron were just an item on a checklist. Without tears, without apologies, Lauren spoke as if resolving a business agreement. "Sign, please. I'd already decided. And I think it's better for both of us." It was hard to decide what hurt more, the betrayal revealed so rawly or the indifference with which she discarded him. Aaron didn't yell. He didn't beg. He didn't ask, why. There was a heavy dignity in his pain, something he didn't even know existed until that moment. He looked at the papers, held the pen for a few seconds, then placed it back on the table without signing anything. With a steady voice, though weighed down by exhaustion, he simply said, "My lawyer will contact you." Without haste, he stood up and crossed the room like someone crossing the last border of a life that no longer belonged to him. Deep down, Aaron knew, the love he'd sustained for so many years had died long before that afternoon, and finally, he was beginning to accept it. The next morning, Aaron woke up in what he no longer called home. With a simple backpack on his shoulders and an empty gaze, he crossed the door for the last time. He drove to the warehouse where he worked, handed in his resignation letter with few words, just enough to let them know he wouldn't be coming back. Then, he drove across the city to the delivery center, took off his ID badge, left his uniform on the counter, and thanked them with a discreet nod. There was no room for explanations or dramatic goodbyes. He was closing not just a work cycle but an entire chapter of his life, like shutting a door that no longer led anywhere. With empty pockets and an even emptier heart, Aaron got into his car without knowing where he was going. He carried no maps, no plans, no promises. Just the silence around him and a raw instinct to survive. He left like someone abandoning the wreckage of a shipwreck, without looking back, without writing letters, without leaving notes. The pain was brutal, but within it was a thin thread of something new emerging, a rebuilding instinct, a fragile strength, almost brittle, but resilient. Sometimes, what should have broken a man ends up, unintentionally, shaping who he was truly meant to be. Aaron drove for hours, passing through towns that all seemed the same, as if the whole world had lost its color. He stopped only to refuel, exchanging no words with anyone. Each mile driven seemed to peel away another piece of the life he'd left behind. He wasn't looking for a specific city. He was searching for a place where he could breathe without feeling the weight of the past crushing his chest. When the car threatened to break down completely, Aaron found himself on a narrow road flanked by small farms and weathered signs. An improvised sign read, "Welcome to Willow Creek." There was nothing special about this town, and perhaps that was exactly what made it perfect for him. A forgotten place where no one knew his name and where the scars he carried might, perhaps, stop stinging. He rented a small room above a mechanic's shop in the center of town. The smell of oil and metal was strong, but to Aaron, it smelled like survival. He didn't choose the accommodation for comfort but for cost. Every penny now had to be carefully counted. He unpacked his backpack on the stiff bed, observing the handful of clothes and belongings that remained. There were no photos, no material memories of a previous life. Just the essentials, and even the essentials felt too heavy. That night, lying down haphazardly, Aaron didn't think about revenge. He didn't think about justice. He thought only of the strange sensation of emptiness that filled him like never before. For the first time in a long while, he no longer had to sustain dreams that weren't his own. The next morning, not exactly sure what he was looking for, he walked through the narrow streets of Willow Creek. A poster in the window of a store caught his attention, "Assistant technician needed. Will train." Without hesitation, he went in, briefly spoke with the owner, a man named Frank, who seemed more interested in willingness than experience. Aaron knew almost nothing about electronics beyond the basics, but he offered effort and commitment, two things that few people around here seemed to have in excess. Frank gave him a chance without much ceremony. He handed Aaron a toolbox, pointed to a pile of broken devices, and said, "Learn by doing." The work was tiring in a different way. It didn't require frantic running around or carrying extreme weights, but it demanded patience. And Aaron, who had spent years waiting for rewards that never came, had learned to be patient. Fixing electronic devices became more than just a temporary job, it turned into a kind of silent therapy. Every wire reconnected, every old radio that came back to life, every TV that lit up again brought a small breath of accomplishment. It was as if, little by little, he was reconnecting the pieces of his own soul, bit by bit. One day, while repairing a portable radio that seemed to have been forgotten for decades, an elderly woman named Mrs. Campbell entered the shop. She carried the radio with the care of someone holding a living memory. She said that this device played her late husband's favorite songs and that for years she had tried to find someone who knew how to fix it. Aaron, with still inexperienced hands but sincere dedication, spent hours until he managed to get the radio to emit its old, shaky sounds again. When the device finally played, the woman smiled with tears in her eyes and said, "Sometimes God breaks you completely just to put you back together the right way." That phrase stuck with him like an echo. Stronger than any empty advice he'd ever heard. Truer than any promise he'd ever received. Aaron understood right then that Willow Creek wasn't just a passing place. It was where he'd have the chance to rebuild himself, without asking permission, without carrying anyone else's weight except his own. And maybe, just maybe, it was possible to start building something new here. Something that was truly his. The weeks passed in Willow Creek like leaves carried by the wind. Aaron threw himself into work in silence, focusing all his energy on learning a new trade and constructing a new version of himself. He avoided thinking about what he'd left behind, like someone avoiding touching a wound that still throbbed. But one day, while organizing boxes in the shop, he received a call that brought him back, even if briefly, to the world he had abandoned. It was his lawyer. In a calm voice, he informed Aaron that the divorce process was ready to be finalized and that, under state law, Aaron was entitled to half the value of the house they had lived in together. Lauren had tried to contest, but the documents and testimonies confirmed everything he had sacrificed for that home. Without hesitation, Aaron authorized the lawyer to proceed with the process. Signing the papers this time didn't hurt. It was just the necessary closure of a story that no longer carried any illusion. A few weeks later, the house was sold. A residence that once was full of promises was now just a property to be divided. When the money was deposited into his bank account, Aaron didn't feel joy, nor sadness. It was just money, a cold compensation for everything that had been lost. He didn't make immediate plans, didn't seek to spend, didn't let himself be tempted to erase the pain with something material. He decided to keep that money as one keeps seeds for a season that hasn't yet arrived. He knew his fresh start needed to be built solidly, step by step, without hurry, without impulses. The money stayed there, untouched, waiting for the right moment, while Aaron continued to repair old radios, forgotten TVs, and, most importantly, himself. For the first time in a long while, he understood that not everything needed to be decided in the heat of pain. Some things just needed time, and he, now, was willing to respect the timing of his own reconstruction. Aaron moved through life like someone relearning to walk after a violent fall. The routine at the electronics shop occupied most of his days, and when he wasn't fixing devices, he wandered aimlessly through the streets of Willow Creek, absorbing the simplicity of the place. Gradually, the faces began to become familiar. The baker, the girl at the pharmacy, the mechanic who always waved as he passed. It was as if Aaron was reintegrating into life, piece by piece, the same way he restored old radios, with patience and without rush. There were still days when memories returned like knives, tearing through any distraction, but he no longer let himself drown in them. He simply accepted their existence and kept moving forward. During an annual community event organized to raise funds for the primary school, Aaron volunteered to help. He wasn't sure exactly what he could do, but he had learned that in Willow Creek, intention mattered more than skill. That's how he ended up in the science project section, helping kids build makeshift science fair displays with simple experiments. Amidst the mess of wires, batteries, and colorful poster boards, Aaron met Brooke Anderson. She was a teacher at the school, young, with light brown hair tied back practically, and had a way of speaking that blended sweetness with firmness. Brooke guided the children with infinite patience, as if every small question deserved the best effort. Their first meeting didn't have the exaggerated sparkle of movies, nor instant promises of something grand. It was a shy exchange of smiles while they both struggled to get a model to stand upright. At one point, Aaron, distracted by a child's instructions, accidentally knocked over the entire structure of one of the tables. The noise drew everyone's attention, and for a few seconds, he felt like that broken man from months ago, exposed to curious stares. But Brooke just laughed, a light laugh that carried no mockery, and said, "What matters is trying, even when everything falls apart." Those words cut through Aaron like a warm breeze in a harsh winter. He smiled back, something rare for someone who had carried invisible burdens for so long. In the days that followed, they began to run into each other casually. At the corner cafe, in the main square, at the small bookstore that opened twice a week. Always short conversations, simple, without pretense. Brooke didn't ask intrusive questions about his past, didn't look at him as if she needed to fix him. She accepted what he offered in the moment, and Aaron, without realizing it, began to lower his guard, inch by inch. There was one afternoon, in particular, that stayed etched in his memory. Brooke was organizing a small campaign to collect books for the school and invited Aaron to help. He spent the day carrying boxes and reorganizing old shelves. At the end, they sat on the floor, surrounded by piles of children's books, sharing weak coffee and tired laughter. Brooke commented, in a distracted manner, about how much she loved seeing kids discover new worlds through reading. Aaron watched her speak with such brightness in her eyes that, for a few moments, he forgot all the wounds he carried with him. It was as if, in that moment, only this possibility of a different fresh start existed. The feeling between them grew slowly, without rush, without urgency. There were no hurried declarations or dramatic confessions. Just the constant, silent presence of each other, like a secure anchor in turbulent waters. Aaron, who once thought he needed to fully rebuild himself before allowing himself to feel something new, began to understand that sometimes love doesn't demand perfection. It just asks that you be willing to try, even with the pieces you still carry. Brooke didn't come to complete what was missing in Aaron. She came to show him that he was already whole, despite all the marks he bore. And, unknowingly, she ignited in him something he thought he'd never feel again: hope. Hope that not every story has to end in ruins. Hope that, perhaps, he could still build something beautiful, even after everything. Time in Willow Creek seemed to divide itself into two distinct eras for Aaron, before and after Brooke. And there was another quiet division happening, before and after the shop. Frank, the owner of the small workshop where Aaron worked, was starting to show signs of fatigue. During a casual conversation, he revealed that he was thinking of retiring and selling the business to whoever was willing to take it forward. Aaron heard those words like hearing a calling. For weeks, this idea accompanied him through every service, every repaired radio, every fixed TV. And so, with the calmness of someone who knows they need to respect their own pace, Aaron decided to use the money saved from the sale of the house he had shared with Lauren. Money that, for months, had remained untouched, waiting for the right moment to be used for something meaningful. The negotiation was quick and clean. Frank seemed relieved to pass the shop to someone who valued every part of it. Aaron signed the papers with steady hands and eyes full of a new purpose. For the first time in a long while, what he was building was truly his. With Brooke's help and some friends he'd made in town, he renovated the facade, organized the interior, and renamed the place Blake Tech. It was more than just an electronics shop. It was the living symbol of the reconstruction he had been planting day after day. Aaron understood that to prosper, he'd need to go beyond traditional repairs. He established partnerships with small local businesses, offering ongoing equipment maintenance, system installations, and personalized technical support. In a few months, what started as a timid effort grew into something much bigger. Referrals spread by word of mouth. One satisfied customer led to another, and that other brought 3 more. Aaron learned to manage the business with the same dedication a gardener gives to a fragile sapling. He invested what he could in better equipment, trained local youths interested in learning the trade, expanded the space, and diversified services. Willow Creek, which had once seemed dormant, responded to Aaron's efforts with enthusiasm. The shop thrived. Fixed contracts with neighboring companies ensured stability. For the first time, Aaron wasn't just surviving, he was truly starting to live. With success came the first curious glances. The townspeople, who once saw Aaron as the silent outsider, now greeted him with genuine respect. It was common to hear subtle compliments at the cafe or receive warm handshakes at Sunday's market. He never sought recognition, but there was something deeply rewarding about being valued not for what he had sacrificed for others, but for what he was building with his own hands. Between meetings with business partners and afternoons fixing devices, Aaron found himself smiling more, sleeping better, seeing a future where once he only saw rubble. It was precisely when life was starting to balance out that the past decided to test his strength again. One ordinary morning, while arranging new displays for the shop, Aaron spotted a figure he didn't expect to see again. Lauren was standing across the street, staring fixedly at the facade of Blake Tech. She wore elegant clothes, but her gaze betrayed exhaustion and disorientation. She looked out of place there, like an old puzzle piece trying to fit into a newly reconstructed puzzle. Aaron didn't move. He silently watched as she crossed the street, hesitantly, like someone walking toward the inevitable. When Lauren entered the shop, time seemed to compress between them. She smiled, a tense smile, and said she had heard about the success of Blake Tech. She tried to make conversation, stirring up memories like someone trying to reignite an extinguished flame. She talked about opportunities, nostalgia, and possible fresh starts. Aaron listened in silence, without hurry, without bitterness, without showing any trace of the man she once crushed. When Lauren hinted, subtly, at the possibility of restarting some kind of relationship, Aaron replied with few words, firm as stone. He said that too much time had passed between them and that some things, once destroyed, could never be rebuilt. Lauren insisted. She claimed things had changed, that she deeply regretted, that she realized too late the value of what she had lost. Aaron looked her in the eyes and, for the first time, clearly saw what he had never noticed before, the immense distance between who he had been and who he had become. Without anger, without resentment, with only a calm certainty, he thanked her for the visit and politely asked her to leave. Lauren, with teary eyes, hesitated for a moment before understanding that there was no longer any space for her in this story. Aaron watched through the window as she walked away, shrinking on the sidewalk until she disappeared among the old buildings of the town. He then returned to work, adjusting the display with the same care as before, as if that encounter didn't have the power to shake what was now solid. Because, in fact, it didn't. The man Lauren had left behind years ago remained forever in the past. What existed now was a new Aaron, forged in pain, polished by patience, and crowned by his own strength. Aaron moved on with his life after reuniting with Lauren like someone closing an old book to never open it again. Aaron felt that even with the success of the shop and the financial stability he achieved each month, there was something even more valuable blossoming in his life. Something no amount of money could buy. It was the relationship he was building, day by day, with Brooke. She, with her sweet and firm demeanor, never tried to fill the empty space the past had left in Aaron. She simply stayed by his side, offering presence, understanding, and respect. It was a love that grew in silence, like planting a tree without expecting it to bloom the next day, but trusting that with care and patience, one day it would offer shade and fruit. And Aaron, who once believed he needed to fully rebuild himself before loving again, understood that loving was also a form of rebuilding. Brooke knew the scars Aaron carried, but she never treated them as open wounds. She respected his time, his way of being, his hesitations. There was one afternoon in particular that Aaron would forever keep in his heart. Sitting in the park, watching children run carefree around them, Brooke turned to him and, with the serenity of someone who understands their words before speaking them, said, "You don't have to prove anything to me. I like you exactly as you are." There was no exaggeration in those words. It was just the truth, clean and simple. In that moment, Aaron felt that when love is real, it doesn't demand. It accepts. Conversations turned into future plans, and the once shy glances transformed into deep complicity. Aaron no longer carried the fear of being betrayed, deceived, or replaced. Because Brooke never gave him any reason to doubt. She was living proof that true love doesn't hurt, doesn't diminish, doesn't weigh you down. On the contrary, it soothes the soul. It was during one of these trips, over a simple weekend in a small town, that Aaron realized there was no reason to delay what was already inevitable. Without elaborate scripts or rehearsed speeches, he invited her to walk to the pier of a small lake, and there, he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Brooke's eyes widened in surprise, and before Aaron could even open his mouth to speak, she was already smiling as if she already knew what was coming. He knelt down, unconcerned about his simple clothes, ignoring the wind messing up his hair or the few people around. He simply said, "Do you want to build the rest of your life with me?" Brooke answered with tears in her eyes and a yes that came out between laughter and sobs, as if happiness were spilling over uncontrollably. The wedding was organized in an intimate way, without extravagance, just how they wanted. The ceremony took place in the small central square of Willow Creek, surrounded only by their closest friends and the people who had become their new family. Brooke wore a simple dress, but the way she looked at Aaron made everything seem grand. He, in a light suit and with a calm smile, seemed like a different man. A man who had faced painful losses but knew how to be reborn without hardening. A man who, instead of letting the pain consume him, used his wounds as a foundation to build something real. At the moment of the vows, Aaron held Brooke's hands and spoke with a choked voice, not caring if emotion robbed him of the right words. He said that for a long time, he believed his worth lay in being everything to someone who never saw who he truly was. And now, standing before her, he understood that true love begins when you are accepted entirely, with your imperfections, doubts, and scars. He promised to make their life together a daily construction of respect, freedom, and companionship. Brooke, for her part, promised that she would never try to mold him into what she expected, but would walk beside him, day after day, discovering together who they could still become. When Aaron kissed her after the "I do," he felt that the past, with all its pain, had finally been left behind. Not as something forgotten, but as fertile soil where he had planted the new life now blooming before his eyes. It wasn't the ending of a fairy tale, it was better than that, it was a real beginning, full of human flaws, silent triumphs, and genuine love. A beginning he himself had written, with the courage of someone who chose, one day, to move forward even with a shattered heart. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.